I'm here at the London South Bank University at the Indie Games Collective. We've got some great interviews lined up for this episode. Hello, I'm here with Byron Atkinson-Jones. Byron, what is Zyotix currently working on right now?
Well, I'm currently making a game called Containment Protocol, which is coming to be shown in Res next week. I actually started it in February, so it's a very short development time. It's a adventure game, stealth game, and it's actually kind of inspired by a really old game which you've probably never heard of called Paradroid. Heard of it? No, you haven't. It's a really old game. Came out in the Commodore 64. It's all made in Unity, made in less than a month, but I'm showing it in Res, like I said, and really looking forward to it.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Thank you. You've worked with quite a few big developers, and you're currently managing and directing your own studio. What are the major differences between working with such big people and starting your own company?
Well, the major thing I would say is that when you're working for a big company, especially as a coder, I always say you're implementing games and not making them, because you've got design teams, you've got producers. So my job would be, here's a task, make a pathfinding algorithm. Okay, I'm doing that, but I've got no decision on the design. But when I start my own company, I'm now actually making games. I'm doing the design, I'm doing the production work, I'm doing the marketing, I'm doing the business work, I'm doing everything myself, in more control. The good side is I've got all that. The bad side is I've got all that. I'm having to do everything myself, so I don't get everything right. There's long hours. I mean, I used to complain about doing crunch working for EA. We're here at 10 o'clock at night, they've given us pizza, woo! This is great. No, it's not, it's terrible. I'm never going to do this again. I'm going to work for my own company and never do crunch. The hours I do now is 9 a.m. till about 2 a.m. in the morning. But it's righteous crunch.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. What is the Indie Games Collective, IGC, and what are its aims?
IGC came about because for a very long time, going back a couple of years now, I've always been talking about I wanted to create the Indie Games Collective. I wanted to get all the indie developers together. I mean, you've seen the people in the room here, okay, there are a lot more. And the last one we held, we had about 120 people in one small room. They wanted to come together. The thing is that we're all working as disparate little teams, but if we work together, we could do a lot more. So cross-promotion, events, things like that. So, for instance, today's event is all about all those indies who can afford to go to GDC. It's very expensive to go there. Who perhaps couldn't even submit a talk to talk at GDC. So we want to give them opportunity to give talks, to be able to talk to people and present their ideas and present techniques they do and get their games out the door and stuff like that, and bring knowledge to people here who are thinking about going indie. Or maybe indie already, but not quite managing it. And here you can come here. This is free. We don't charge you for it. That's one thing we're very clear on. We're not going to charge. We get free facilities, which London South Bank University kindly lent us this room, for instance. But you can come here and learn all the things that you would have to go to GDC to learn about. Obviously, I haven't got the same breadth as GDC because that's massive, but we'll do our best. And that's what it's all about, just getting together. So the next one we're going to do might be in Sheffield. We're going to go to Scotland, do them with them, all around. And it's all about doing something productive and useful for all of us. And that's the IGC motto.
I see. What is the most important thing an independent developer can do to make their game a success?
That's actually very tough. I don't think anybody's got the kind of magic formula for making a game a success. I'm trying different things, okay? So earlier, around about December time, I made a game called Blast On, which is on Steam, okay? And I said, I'm going to expose everything I do. How will I do it, okay? So not talk about the development of the game, everybody does that, but I'll talk about the marketing of the game. First phase was just talk about it on Twitter. So see what kind of reach that gets. And as it turns out, it's pretty far. I managed to sell about $1,000 worth on Twitter alone. The next stage is do some PR. That was a lot harder, but the game itself is a 2D shooter and there are not that many of them. There's a reason for that, because they're not very popular. So, getting that press reach on that was a bit harder. The next stage after that is to go further. Now, in between all this going on, I got approached by a publisher who said, we've seen it, we're interested in it, we'd like to get this on Steam for you. So I kind of leapfrogged a couple of ways, okay? So getting on Steam was massively important. I sold more in one day than I did in the entire month on my own website through Steam, because they got millions of visitors. There were on the first day, there were like 1 million views on the front page, 4,000 of which then clicked onto my own game. So it hasn't made bucket loads. I'm not rich. I can't afford Hawaii yet, for instance, but I'm hoping to get there. But it's a massive feature. So if you want to get success, I mean, I say, from my own personal perspective, talk about your game as soon as possible. Get it out there, get knowledge about there. Enter every single competition you can. So Containment Protocol, okay, made in a month, I'm showing it at Res. It's costing me a lot of money to do that, but I'm showing it at Res. That's building up hype. I got a press list of 600 people provided by Res, emailed every single one of them, got a few interviews out of it. That's one success, okay? So really talk about your game, approach them. Once I'm going from Res, I will enter into the IGF. You probably won't win, but the fact that you're entering the IGF is more exposure. Kickstarter, don't do it for the funding, but do it for the publicity. Putting something on Kickstarter, you get thousands upon thousands of views. Greenlight, everybody hates Greenlight, but in 1 week on Greenlight I had 26,000 views on my game. Now compare that to being on Steam itself, I only had 4,000. So Greenlight is actually better for publicity. So if you get your game to a certain state, get on Greenlight, you'll build a community instantly about it. And keep doing that, keep building that community, keep talking about your game, shout about it, never stop shouting about it. Provide useful information people want to retweet on Twitter, and keep going on and on about it. You'll think people are getting bored, but the amount of people follow you to find out about that game. I had lots of people here in this conference approach me saying, oh, I want to know more about Containment Protocol, can you tell me anything about it, can I see it? Now, if I hadn't been shouting about it, nobody would have known about it. And that's, I don't know if it's going to be a success, but that's the pathway to success.
I see. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you the best of luck with IGF. I'm here with Louise James. Could you introduce yourself to our viewers, please, and give us a little bit of your background within the indie scene?
I started as an indie game dev about 3 years ago after getting some contract work for a guy called Dan Marshall who runs a company called Size 5. So I've worked on a number of his games for him. The one that came out was called Gun Monkeys, which was a 1v1 procedurally generated arena deathmatch game with online stuff, and I did all of the character movement code, the gun code, the procedural level code. I did all the hard work, basically. And from there I've moved on to doing stuff for other people, like I'm currently working on Sir You're Being Hunted for the multiplayer code for that and things like that. So I just generally get around and try and help other people build their games, but over the next year I'm looking to kind of bridge out and do my own stuff as well.
Awesome. Your company is called Generic Evil Business. What made you choose this name?
So Generic Evil came around because I noticed the domain name genericevil.com was free, so I had that. And I was sitting on it for about 2 years before I started my business, so it was like, I've got that, so I can just use that for the business name. And it's turned out to be really good because everyone remembers it. It's fairly, it's simple to remember, which is really, really important, and it's funny. And there's lots of fun stuff you can do, like my logo looks like the most lawyer-like logo type, and then so it's really fun to have that, but juxtaposed against like just being plain stupid. So it's a really good name, and I'm glad I kind of fell into having it, which was good.
Could you summarise what you spoke about at this weekend's conference, please?
Right, so I was talking about how Twitter is a really good networking tool, especially if you're kind of like, I get really nervous in large crowds of people. I can't do networking in like kind of like the traditional sense. So being able to use Twitter to talk to other people and network, so you like, if you look at your friends, what they're doing on Twitter, see who they're talking to, then follow them, you build up this massive network relatively easily and stress-free, which is fantastic for introverted people. And being nice to your friends and offering to help them and making sure you know what they're doing and they know what you're doing means that you can just build this like spiral of connections and work, and everything just becomes so much easier than having to meet in a big room like this and go, hello, I don't know who you are. It means you can come into a big room like this, go to Twitter and say, is there anyone here? And then you've got all these people and you can just find them out, and you've got these smaller, condensed areas of people that you know. And it just makes everything way easier. That's kind of my talk. And I'm at Cube2D on Twitter, and you should follow me.
What advice would you give to aspiring developers?
What advice would I give to aspiring developers? So, just try something, right? And build it, and go from the start, having nothing, and just build up and actually releasing something for free. So, the best one to do is Pong, right? Because if you've never made a game before, make Pong. It's really simple. You've got a ball and you've got two bats, right? But from there, you go on to having score systems. You can develop like leaderboards. You can develop multiplayer, online multiplayer, local multiplayer. You can do AI. From such a simple little thing, you can learn pretty much every single aspect of how game development works. So it's really high. It's really tempting to go, I really love Gears of War, I should make that. No, you shouldn't, because it's really difficult. Make Pong first, then make Gears of War. That kind of thing.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
I'm here with Tracey McGarrigan. Would you introduce yourself to our viewers, please?
Hi, my name is Tracey McGarrigan. I'm the PR manager at Green Man Gaming.
Thank you. What would you say is the most common mistake that new indie developers make?
I think the most common mistake is not thinking about PR from the very word go. As soon as you start thinking about a game, tell people about it, share your ideas. As soon as you start making a game, tell people that you're making it. Share every little mistake that you make, share every development, because then right from the word go, you're building an audience, you're building interest. And then when you're ready to launch, rather than then scrabbling around for a bit of coverage, rather than trying to suddenly engage people in what you're doing, you've got an audience, you've got interest, and yeah, the common mistake is not even thinking about that way in advance.
I see. How important is PR to someone publishing independently?
I think it's massively important because there's so much competition, there's so many games, there's so much choice that's coming out to the market. If you're an independent person, the chances are you have less budget, you're already putting everything or your heart and soul into your game, and it's really difficult to find the energy and the time to put into the PR, but that makes it even more vital. So if you're an independent developer, again, preparing and working in schedule-wise, how you're going to talk about your game, how you're going to promote it is really, really important.
I see. What is the best thing a developer can do to self-promote?
Come to events like this, definitely. Network. Get on Twitter, talk to other indie devs, talk to press. There's a lot of press people on Twitter that will actively, say, come and talk to us, tell us about their game. Really, really important is have a website or somewhere that once you've told someone about your game, you can go and actually see a really nice screenshot. Contact details. You'll be amazed how many times somebody goes, oh my god, I've got this amazing game, and we go, yes, it looks amazing, but I don't know who you are, I don't know how to contact you, I don't know how to sell your game. So making sure that everything is in place for people to be able to get back to you and talk to you about your game is really important. And telling as many people as you can. Tell your family, tell your friends, tell your dog, tell all of those people to go and tell 100 other people, and do it early on.
I see. Thank you so much for your time, Tracy. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks. That was good fun.
Hello, would you like to introduce yourself to our viewers, please, and tell us a bit of your background?
Okay. Well, my name is Alister Aitcheson. I work as a sort of one-man band indie developer. So I do my own coding, do my own artwork, and I also do all the game design. And then I also run the whole business as well, doing all the business marketing, PR, writing up the copy, the whole thing really as a one-man enterprise. I've been doing this for about past 3.5 years. Started out doing mostly iPhone and iPad games. Now I'm working on kind of touchscreen games on like large screens for Windows 8.
I see. That sounds like a lot of hard work. What is your design ethos?
So the big thing I'm doing a lot with at the moment is sort of physical play on a shared tablet. So you get 2 or more people on one touch screen, and making games which encourage them to get in each other's way, to push and shove, grab each other's arms. And for me, I love the whole kind of personal experience of having that kind of physical contact with another player. It's like something that you can't do with an AI. It brings kind of personality into the mix. So a lot of what's involved in that is actually encouraging players to cheat, giving them opportunities to play dirty and come up with creative ways to surprise each other and make each other laugh. And just, saying that, the rules are only there for people who want to follow them, and making the game still work as a fun experience even when you don't follow the rules.
That sounds amazing. What do you personally think the future holds for game development?
Indies specifically, or
in the independent scene.
Okay, I mean, the indie scene is, it's growing and growing and growing, and now with the new consoles, suddenly I think the platform holders are taking indies a lot more seriously than they used to. But the landscape is changing very quickly. 4 years ago when I was starting out, iPhone and iPads and Android phones and tablets, they were like fresh new pastures. where people could put something on there and have it spotted just for being there. You can't do that now. It's really hard to get noticed. So you have to start thinking of other ways to reach your audience, and you have to be a lot more kind of specific about who your audience is. You're not looking to reach millions and millions of iPad users. What you want is a community of people for whom your game really speaks to them on a personal level, and that's why they're invested in it. That's why they'll tell their friends about it. So I really think, as indie development goes on, indie games are going to be more and more personal, and kind of hit those personal niches that games players really want but haven't quite had filled yet.
I see. With such market saturation, do you think indie developers can still shine through?
I think so. I mean, I think what you have to realize is that you just can't get away by doing stuff that's okay. It's good for an indie game. It's you can't pretend like as an indie developer you're going to make something that's inferior but cheaper to a AAA game. You've got to make something that's better than a AAA game, and to do that you need to fight on different battlegrounds. You can't compete in terms of graphics, you can't compete in terms of number of user base, size of user base, like if you wanted to compete with Clash of Clans or something. But what you can do is you can kind of offer conceptual design, game design, an artistic message that just wouldn't be possible in any of these big money situations, a personal experience. So really, there is a lot of saturation, but there are a lot of games players out there, with a real passion for the medium, who want to see something fresh and new and innovative and challenging.
What platforms should independent developers aim to develop for in the near future?
So, I think PC is still a very good place to develop for, and what you can do with PC is you can build a game for PC, have it reach an enthusiastic audience, because a lot of passionate gamers own PCs and are looking to PC for the next big thing. Build up an audience there, and then have that as the kind of the springboard, the validation you need to get onto consoles, which is where you might reach a kind of a larger market. But another thing I'd suggest is sort of, I guess, thinking outside the box. We've got these kind of platforms with built-in marketplaces and things like that, but I think there's a huge untapped potential in kind of installation-based games. Games like Roppel Pillar, Renga by Wall 4, these really kind of games that are designed to be played at public events and monetized through running them as installations for the public, rather than sort of trying to get them into as many pockets as possible. It's a huge untapped area, and I think there's so much that can be done, and that means custom hardware and custom interfaces.
Thank you. Since you develop on your own, how do you manage your time when working on your games?
It actually comes relatively easily, because when you're working on your own, you don't have to stop to explain each step to the other people you're working with. In your head, what it is you want and what it is that you want to achieve. Although it does make sense to talk to other people about what you're doing, because it helps you when you start to vocalize stuff. You notice where all the holes are. But realistically speaking, if you can be honest with yourself and not let yourself get sucked into bad ideas, and challenge everything you come up with, and write it down and ask yourself, why won't it work? And just keep on doing that throughout development. Try to make every game a game that you can build in 3 months, because you won't build it in 3 months. It will take much longer than 3 months, but if you plan to do something in 3 months, you will be able to finish it, launch it, see it through, learn from the whole process of marketing it, all of that. Really, keep things small. Try and maximize the amount of impact you can for each element you put in, and be honest with yourself all the time about whether you think something is really constructive or whether it's wasted time.
Thank you so much for your answers. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hello, could you introduce yourself to our viewers, please, and tell us a bit of your background?
Yeah, sure. My name's Guy Cocker. I'm a journalist of about 10 years covering technology and video games, and I currently write for a few publications including Wired, T3 stuff, and I do broadcast stuff for the BBC and Sky News as well, mainly talking about video games.
Awesome. How would you say your interaction with developers differs from when covering AAA titles and independent titles?
In a lot of ways, it's quite similar in as much as you're usually talking to someone to meet an ultimate aim, which is to write about something. If it's from me, I'll be asking for something to be able to write about a game, and for them, they'll want me to write about it. So in the bigger companies, it's usually a PR department that does that. Although you get people at BioWare like Manhir. Was it Manvira? I just did a story about him in my podcast. Basically, you get a lot of people on Twitter, Cliff Bleszinski, big personalities, but they still usually have a PR agent to do their communicating with the press. And on the indie side, it's less likely to be like that. There are some indies that do have PR departments, or some indies like Mike Bithell, who comes up a lot, who are very good at talking directly to the press. But for the most part, it comes down to the indie in question. Usually the guy that's the most confident, I guess, to go and approach the press and say, we've got a game coming out, would you be interested? Or to try and just have that liaison with the press. But it usually happens in a variety of different forms: email, Twitter, sometimes Facebook, LinkedIn increasingly actually for me. But my preferred kind of communication is usually face to face or on the phone. It's just, I just prefer the personal touch. That's just lots of other journalists prefer emails, so it does vary from journalist to journalist, but yes, it's a variety of communication methods.
I see. As a journalist, what advice can you offer to young independent developers?
So the main advice that I could offer to young independent developers is to not underestimate the importance of going out to the press, and not just the traditional press, but YouTube guys, Twitch guys, the guys that are doing it kind of out of their bedrooms, the guys that are doing it for fun, because those guys are on a trend. Those guys are becoming more and more important, whereas traditional gaming media is on a decline very rapidly. Actually, it's quite a scary thing for a lot of traditional publishers. But I would say when I ran GameSpot in the UK for about 4 years, and I would always say to my writers about the importance of writing something but then not being afraid to publish it and promote it and get it out there, because really writing, there's this tendency for writers to, once they're done with a project, it's just like, right, thank God that's over, move on to the next, whereas that's something you're only halfway there. And it's the same for developers. You've got to think, right, how do I get people to play my game, how do I get people to buy my game, how do I get my name out there? And that's the short-term goal for a lot of developers is to get their first game being played about, but it's so important and so easy actually, in fact, these days to think about the long-term goals. And if you look at someone, as I said, Mike Bithell's been quoted a lot. He's got very good at just being embedded, always available on Twitter. That guy that's ready to make a quote about something, he's very honest. And as indie developers, you can use that angle because you're freed of the constraints of PR departments. So you can actually go out there and say, if you spot a story that you're really experienced about, say if you're a Unity developer or an Unreal Engine developer, and at GDC this week they've changed their pricing models, talk to develop and say, I've got an opinion on this if you need it. It takes effort and it takes a lot of kind of proactive mentality, but once you get into a rhythm of it, it doesn't take long. I know as a journalist, it doesn't take long for, say, if you are that expert on Unity, for the writers at Develop Magazine or MCV Magazine to automatically think of you and get in touch with you. So it's kind of that, you just need to get some momentum going. So that's a very long-winded answer, but there's so much opportunity out there for smaller developers. They're freed of the shackles of PR. They can say whatever they want. It's amazing. EA, Activision, they're all behind so many layers of media training and boring just bureaucracy. So I'd say if you're an indie, embrace that freedom.
Thank you so much for your time.
No worries.
Hello, could you introduce yourself to our viewers and give us a little bit of your background?
Certainly, I'm James Wallace. I run a games consultancy called Space with 3 A's. We're a AAA company. And we basically advise people on how to use games, and we help them to build games. Basically, every type of game there is, from everything from AAAs right down to street games and pervasive games.
I see, awesome. Would you summarise what you discussed about crowdfunding via Kickstarter and how it can help game developers?
Absolutely. Kickstarter is the preeminent crowdfunding site, and crowdfunding is essentially a return to the 17th and 18th century model of publishing, where you got the money up front. The authors appealed to people to say, I want to write this book, give me some money to write the book. and they were paid up front, and that allowed them to live while they were writing a book, Samuel Johnson's Dictionary being one of the most famous. And it's a return to that, except obviously using the web, so you can entertain a global community with your project. You can raise potentially hundreds of thousands, even millions of pounds. Even if that's not what you were after to start with, you can ask for just a few £1,000s. There was a miniatures games company in Texas called Reaper Miniatures, who I asked for, I think, $20,000 to transfer their molds to start doing plastic miniatures. They made $4.5 million. And of course, the advantage of not going through angel funding or VC is you get to keep all that money. If an angel, you ask for 20,000, you might get 20,000. Kickstarter, you can end up with literally millions. It can transform your entire business, your entire project. The project I did last year, which is a tabletop game called Las Vegas, I asked for £3,000 to cover the artwork costs. I made $24,000. My office mates asked for $3,000 for a similar project. They made $93,000. And what was going to be a tiny little game, quite thin, paperback, became 2 full-colour hardback books. So if you backed the game for $15, thinking you were going to get a little pamphlet, and you ended up with 2 hardback books, you were a very happy backer. So it works for everyone. It works for the publishers and the developers, but it works for the backers as well.
Wow, that's amazing. Would you share some of your own Kickstarter experiences?
Yes, of course. Running a Kickstarter is an amazing, it's a month-long adrenaline high. You wake up in the morning thinking, how many more people have pledged? That's, well, if it's going well, that is. If it's going badly, it's just dismal and awful, and you should probably cancel the project and retool it and relaunch it. But when it's going well, and the first few days, if you've done your pre-publicity right, if you've set up your page right, you'll get this amazing input of not just money, but feedback from people and excitement about your project, this thing you've been gestating for ages. So I recommend it very highly to anyone who's got a project they'd like to get off the ground, whether it's a game. Kickstarter will back pretty much anything. Within limits. You can't go, I'd like to go on holiday. That doesn't work. But there are crowdfunding sites that'll do that too.
What's the best piece of financial advice you could give to developers?
To a new developer, a new studio, someone just getting in, because I was in this position in the mid-90s, I set up a company. I think the very best advice I can give is watch the pennies. Scrimp and save. Don't spend any money you don't have to. You'll get to a point where that doesn't become necessary anymore. But when you're starting up, every penny is precious. You never know when you're going to need that extra £500 to pay for a license, to pay for some extra resources, some extra hardware, whatever else. Just scrimp and save and watch the pennies and keep your fingers crossed that there'll come a time when you're rolling in it.
I see. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolute pleasure.